"Tell me what you eat, and I'll tell you who you are." This renowned quote is attributed to Anthelme Brillat-Savarin, a 19th-century French lawyer and the author of the Physiology of Taste. His statement implies that one can glean insights into a person's background, culture, and identity through their dietary choices. Commonly, Asia is associated with rice in Europe with bread. Asians have been consuming rice for over 10,000 years, while Europeans have enjoyed bread for more than 8,000 years. So, can we understand these people better, as the French gourmet suggests? This video aims to discuss the influence of rice and wheat on human history and life. In a previous video titled, "Why Asia Has Such a Large Population," we touched on the population-sustaining capabilities of rice versus wheat. However, this doesn't mean that rice is superior to wheat. Humans simply chose the crop that was most beneficial for survival based on their climate and environment. In some respects, one could argue we've been ruled by the characteristics of rice and wheat. A classic example of this influence is the widely recognized collectivism in Asia compared to individualism in Europe. Rice, although it could sustain many more people than wheat, required intensive labor and long hours. From planting to harvesting, and especially in the creation and maintenance of irrigation systems, rice cultivation was challenging. Collective effort was essential. Rice farming was virtually impossible without a group working together. This prompted people to live closely in communities, relying on each other. For things to run smoothly, strict adherence to rules was paramount. This environment fostered a strong sense of collective consciousness. Once a community chose rice cultivation, collectivism was a natural outcome, not just for efficiency, but for survival. In contrast, while wheat might not sustain as many people as rice, it was resilient to different climates, thriving even in cold and arid regions. This made it perfect for the infertile lands of Europe, which had been impacted by ice ages in the past. Importantly, wheat didn't require elaborate irrigation systems, so fewer people were needed for its cultivation. Compared to the time invested in rice farming, wheat farming took about half as much time. Europeans would sow seeds in the spring, tend to their livestock throughout the seasons, and return when the wheat was ready for harvest. With wheat farming being possible with fewer people, relationships weren't as crucial as in rice farming regions. This setting laid the groundwork for a more individualistic and independent way of thinking. As agricultural practices scaled up, more manpower was needed in rice farming areas. This called for organized systems to manage the workforce. An authority was also necessary to distribute the collectively produced rice. This evolved framework is what we recognize today as a nation-state. In Asia, the vast capital amassed from rice cultivation led to the early emergence of absolute monarchies and centralized governments. A sophisticated bureaucracy more advanced than the West's was established early on to support these regimes. To select bureaucrats, Asia had a long-standing tradition of civil service examinations. On the other hand, Europe's wheat farming faced challenges like low agricultural productivity and population scarcity. This made it difficult for wealth and power to concentrate in a few hands. Due to powerful nobles who often rivaled the king in wealth and military might, absolute monarchies didn't emerge until the 17th century. The formal bureaucratic system appeared even later, in the modern era. However, the silver lining was that Europe, with its weaker roots in absolute monarchy, democratized faster than Asia. The farming characteristics of rice and wheat also influenced social systems, leading to sharecropping in Asia and serfdom in Europe. Rice cultivation, which required timely irrigation, needed seasoned wisdom. Thus, leasing land to skilled farmers in a sharecropping system proved efficient. Wheat farming, on the other hand, didn't need specialized skills, so entrusting the work to serfs wasn't problematic. Growing wheat was easier than rice, but consuming it was trickier. The tough husk had to be crushed to extract the flour. If dehulling wheat had been as simple as rice, Europeans might have also boiled and eaten it like rice. Instead, they had to get creative, leading to the inventions of bread and pasta. Grinding wheat into flour was no easy task. Hence, large mills became village staples. While we typically associate windmills with the Netherlands, by the 17th century, there were over 200,000 windmills throughout Europe. This explains the prevalence of the surname Miller in the West. Bread making was a more complicated process than boiling rice. Kneading the dough was time-consuming, and not every household could afford an oven. So, communal baking areas were established near windmills, or large bakeries existed in medieval towns. This led to the emergence of the baker surname. Rice was generally consumed where it was produced. Its simple de-hulling process meant most families could mill the rice at home for consumption. However, in Europe, the large-scale cultivation of wheat necessitated developed roads and transportation systems to move it from fields to mills. Plus, the intricate machinery required for milling and bread-making sowed the seeds for the later Industrial Revolution. Both rice and wheat were nutritionally sound staples for humans, but they had deficiencies. Rice, while low in minerals and vitamins, was complemented with side dishes. Wheat, although protein-rich, lacked essential amino acids, which required the consumption of meat and dairy. This drove the need for livestock farming. Conveniently, wheat fields needed periodic resting to rejuvenate, and these fallow lands were used for raising sheep and cattle. Europe's environment fostered the growth of commerce, purchasing meat and dairy products, or trading for wheat, especially during fallow periods, was crucial for survival. This early reliance on trade meant that commerce was respected in Europe. In contrast, in rice-dominant cultures, wandering traders often faced skepticism due to the premium placed on every laborer in rice cultivation. Another factor that accelerated trade in Europe was the nature of bread. The communal baking areas, typically located next to windmills, operated roughly every 10 days or once a month, largely due to limited fuel and baking intervals. This infrequency implies that the bread lasted for weeks, sometimes even a month. For a long time, the taste of bread wasn't a priority in Europe. Soft bread, made with yeast, only became popular in the 19th century. Before that, bread's longevity was paramount, leading to the production of very hard, moisture-free loaves. These were so hard that they often needed to be sawed or even axed to be consumed. This tradition is why bread knives today still have serrated edges. One reason alcoholic drinks were so popular in Europe was to soften these hard loaves. Thanks to the long shelf life of this bread, trade expanded further and even paved the way for the age of exploration. In contrast, long-distance travel was more challenging in rice cultures. Rice lagged behind wheat in terms of preservation, portability, and convenience. For instance, the 15th century Chinese naval expeditions under Zheng He had to stick mostly to coastal areas to resupply food, given rice's limitations. Rice was significantly heavier than wheat and harder to process, making large-scale transportation very challenging. Some scholars suggest that logistical difficulties in supplying armies led to fewer wars in Asia compared to Europe. The Mongols were an exception, as they relied on meat and dairy, simplifying their supply challenges. World-renowned historian Yuval Noah Harari wrote in his book, *Sapiens*, that it wasn't humans who domesticated wheat, but wheat that domesticated humans. People lived alongside wheat and rice, providing water, weeding, and protecting against pests, all in return for sustenance. Considering the immense effort humanity has invested in obtaining rice and bread, and the profound impact these staples have had on us, Harari's statement seems quite plausible.